Hello. Today we're going to take a look at how we can utilize CAPSYS Capture utility called Remote Release Server to automatically take batches from our local workstation and release them to the server. Now typically with the standard product out of the box, as batches are scanned into the system, either one at a time or collectively as a group of batches, the user makes a conscientious decision to transmit or release those to the server. They do this by placing check marks next to the batches that they have scanned. And as they check mark the batches, they can choose either one at a time or by checking several of them at a time, release them or transmit them to the server, and the server will begin processing. For some users, this works fine. For others, they may find this troublesome, especially if they have a very scan-intensive environment and they don't want to be inhibited from scanning or distracted from scanning. They want the batches to be automatically released and not interfering with any of the batch processing or workflow that they have from a document scanning or preparation standpoint. So let's just quickly review how we go about scanning documents. I'm going to simulate scanning by importing a batch. You can see I'm just importing the documents into a new batch that has been created for me. And I'll repeat this process again, just randomly selecting some pages here, importing those in. Again, just simulating the scan process, typical workflow that you would find in an environment. Now I want to transmit some number of batches, or one or many. To do that, I select the ones that I'm interested in releasing just by placing check marks next to them. I could select all or clear all. I'm just going to pick a couple here, maybe just one. Do my release, and you can see it takes a little bit of time to do the transmittal. I'll select another one, transmit it, release it, select a third, release it. So some people scan, release, others scan several batches at a time and then do a group release, if you will. So is there a better way to accomplish this goal without the users having to make these decisions, when to transmit the batches and how many at a time, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is where we can introduce an alternative method to the standard product offering, and we call that Remote Release Server, which is a Windows service that runs after it's been installed by your administrator on your workstation and will auto-complete or auto-release these batches in an unattended manner. So to do this, this is what the configuration looks like. This is not something that an end user interacts with. It's something that the administrator would set up. So I'm just kind of giving you a view into what the configuration process is like. We have a little applet that lets you go in, a control panel, so to speak, that lets you go in and configure the name of your website that you're going to release to. So we enter that into the system, probably the same name as the website up at the top that we're logged into with our full client, our web client right now. You're also going to give it a username and a password. This is probably not the same username and password that you're logged into at your local workstation. This is going to be, again, something the administrator sets up. We do have to be conscientious of our licensing to make sure we have enough users to satisfy the remote release server from logging in and logging out to perform this auto release for us. So you want to check with your administrator to make sure you have the proper licenses to do this. Next thing is we're going to configure what's called the monitor path. And what the monitor path is simply a profile in which the local batches are being scanned to. When we scan using the scan application inside of CAPSYS Capture, we're scanning to a local folder on our workstation, and then when we're ready to release, we scan this folder for the batches and then transmit them to the server. We also can configure what's called a batch processing delay. So we're looking for inactivity on the batch. That's kind of our detection method to determine whether or not the batch is ready for transmittal. So we're setting an interval here. This can be set to a minimum of 1 minute or some interval greater. The default is set to 5 minutes. You can change it to 10. or just set it back to some value such as 5, which is the default. Save that configuration, and my configuration process is complete. Once this is set, the next thing I would do, if I were the administrator, is I'd want to enable the service. To enable the service, we use the Microsoft Management Console. The services, we go in, and the service, after it's been installed, is set to automatic upon reboot to start. I got it set right now off. I'm going to turn it on. Turning it on will then now count the number of minutes from the time the batch was last used, and then it will begin transmitting these batches based on the time interval that I have configured in my system. So I'll no longer have to manually select these to release them. It will be done automatically. So after the time interval, you can see the batches have disappeared from my screen, so they're no longer on my local system. They've been automatically transmitted and removed from the local workstation. I'll hop over to the Index tab, open up a batch that's been processed. I can see that the batch made it over. All my pages, some of the index information according to the workflow was scraped and placed in the appropriate fields. So with that, hopefully you get an understanding of how we can minimize some of the work steps required and make life a little bit easier for CAPSYS Capture users.